It seems like the universal truth working in L&D is that we are always time poor. So any opportunity we have to speed up the workflow, get our product out there quicker, is of value. For that reason, I love using online resource sites. Here are some of my favourites. So there are hundreds of resource sites out there. You want it, there's a site that has it somewhere for a downloadable resource. And there are definitely free options and paid options and massively overpriced options. Looking at Adobe Stock, for instance. And Shutterstock falls into that category for me as well. So I'm not really going to talk about them because I don't actually think, as an instructional designer, as someone in L&D, they have a lot of value. The ones that I do want to talk about, there's a couple that I do use and a couple that I have used but don't use anymore, and I'll tell you why as we go through them. So first up, we have Unsplash. Unsplash is great for stock photography and can be entirely free. I say can be because when you use it for free, like most quote-unquote free stock imagery sites, you're under a creative license. So often you can't sell the work. So if you work internally, that's fine. But as a freelancer or a small business, it's not going to be usable for you. Often you also have to credit the original creator or photographer, in the case of stock photography, in the work itself. That can be problematic if you are selling work on. But great if you work in-house. And the same is true of Pexels. It's a very similar platform, but the quality of what you get from these two is the reason I still include them in this list. It is not cheesy, useless 1990s, 1980s stock photography that sadly is still being generated today. It's not all thumbs up and high fives. It's, you get a good amount of diversity. You can get an image for pretty much anything in these sites, and you don't have to pay anything for them, which is great. For those who watch the free ID know I like free whenever it's available. Those two are the only free ones that I have personally used and would suggest to others. But with those kind of provisos in mind, the licensing is not going to work if you're selling your work or if you're a freelancer, and you are going to have to visibly credit the original photographer in your work to be able to use them. Those are pretty big trade-offs. You've also got, for music, you've got sites like Purple Planet, very similar thing. If you're using it in-house or for personal use, you can use it under a Creative Commons license. You're going to have to credit the original creator, or they do sell commercial licenses as well if you want to use their music content. But if you're going to use Purple Planet's music content, I would probably suggest holding on and listening to some of the more premium options in this list, because if you're going to pay for a license, you may as well get everything rather than just one thing. On that note, the first premium option on this list, and probably one of the best known stock sites out there, is Storyblocks. Storyblocks is a fantastic site for stock footage and stock music. They do other things, but that's all I've ever used them for. The footage is fantastic. The amount of kind of 4K and even 8K footage they have is fantastic, and if you're trying to take it and kind of merge it with other content you've recorded, they do a really good job of recording things like, what camera it was filmed on, what the color profile was, and this makes sort of color grading to make it match other footage a lot easier. The music they have as well is fantastic. They do have sound effects, but they also have actual music on there. The biggest drawback with Storyblocks is that it is, of everything out there, on the more expensive end of reasonable. It doesn't kind of cross into the Shutterstock, Adobe Stock range of obscenely overpriced, but it is not a budget option. Really, I would say it's only going to be viable for those for whom video is the main thing you want stock for. If, however, the main priority in terms of stock is going to be sort of visuals, vectors, PSDs, some stock photography, iconography, things like that, I could really recommend FreePic. Now, I recommend FreePic on this end of the list because I think the free one is great, but you are still in that world of crediting the original person in your work, and yes, you should do it, even if you don't. I know it can seem silly, but someone has given you their content for free, so that is important. That's the term of the license as well, and you don't want to get in trouble with the actual licensing there. But also, FreePick is not an expensive membership. We'll put the price up somewhere nearby, it'll be here, and a link in the description to all these anyway. I think it is worth having a premium license to FreePick. First of all, it unlocks a lot more content, and a lot of the better content, and the content there is worth having, because a lot of it is vector and PSD, so you're going to be able to open these in Illustrator and Photoshop, edit them, recolor them, pull elements out of a larger scene, build your own things, and that flexibility to me is the value of this stuff. Quite often you don't want to just lift and shift an entire screen from it into a piece of e-learning or into a video or whatever it might be. You want to, just pull elements, characters, background pieces, iconography. FreePick is fantastic for that, and the range that's available on there is just phenomenal. So I've used all of these at some point or another, and I've kind of already said about why for Pexels and Unsplash I moved on. Really, as soon as I became freelance and then set up a small business and started selling work to people, I can't be using credited and non-commercial stock, so I had to move. That's when I moved to kind of FreePick and Storyblocks, and about a year ago now I actually moved away from both of those. Most of the time, I still occasionally dip back into Storyblocks, and moved over to the Envato Elements site. This is the one place that I do maintain a constant license to. The reason being, very simply, it's probably the broadest stock membership site I've ever seen. You've got everything from video templates for intros through to stock footage, obviously stock photography and illustration. You've got Photoshop files. You've also got add-ons and plugins for things like Photoshop and Adobe XD, things like brushes and layering techniques and all these kind of different things. You've got web design related items, things like WordPress themes and plugins, things for Drupal and Unity and all these other things. You've also encapsulated in that got music and sound effects. The list kind of just goes on and on and on. Fonts is another huge one. They've got a massive library of fonts that you then have on a commercial license, which is something we always tend to forget. Fonts, like stock photography, have licenses attached to them. Just downloading something from DaFont does not mean you have the commercial rights to use it. Some you do, some you don't. But again, there you can be certain on Envato that you do. And they also have a whole range of courses available. Now, this has been brilliant for me as someone who has very much learned things like the Adobe Suite on the fly. As and when I've needed to learn how to do something, I've figured it out. And having a platform that says, look, a lot of this stuff is After Effects into Premiere or Audition into Prelude or whatever it might be. Here are some basic courses on how to use these pieces of software if you haven't done so before. It's a really great primer, especially as an instructional designer, as opposed to a, quote-unquote creative, to be able to use this software and use the stock items to their fullest. Finally, the biggest reason I now pretty much exclusively use Envato is their licensing management part of the account. Now this sounds really dull, but it's super important. So when using stock, be it video or photography or fonts, quite often clients will want the license under which you have used it. And certainly I want to make sure I've got them to make sure I'm covered regardless of whether or not the client's interested. And the really great thing with Envato is whenever you download content from their site, it's going to ask you, what project is this for? Create a little project, just type the name in, add it, register it, and then it saves the license for that piece and that instance to that project. So if I need the licenses for a certain job that I've done, I can just go in, find the project name, and all the licenses are there ready to be downloaded and sent to the client or provided as evidence. And whenever you download music, it goes so far as to say, hey, is this going to be used on YouTube? If it is, pop your YouTube URL in here to make sure you do not get a copyright strike. It's those little things that they just save minutes. They save a video being copyright struck and having to appeal it and taking a week before a video goes live. They save a client needing to, or me needing to look through a big list of licenses to send them over to a client to make sure that they're confident I know what I'm doing. It's those things that to me make it, the best thing I've tried so far, and certainly the stock platform I would recommend. And for those who were asking, Envato Elements is actually where I got the stock animation for the 31 Days of Christmas promo we put out with a little spinning sort of snow globe. Really great short bit of animation. To create that from scratch would have taken days. Instead, it took me 20 minutes. Those are the kind of efficiencies that can allow us to really adapt and respond to business needs. So if you're not using stock, give it a go, you might be surprised. If you are, drop down into the comments and let me know where you're getting it and what you're using it for. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful and interesting, and if not, let me know. Please consider subscribing and liking the video and coming back tomorrow for our next one.